Good afternoon, or whatever time it is where you are watching this, and welcome to Tuesday Timeout Chapel service for Luther College at the University of Regina, April 21st, 2020.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
This is the online version of what used to be a gathering of people at Luther College on the University of Regina campus. It's a time of experimentation and upheaval in the entire culture, and so now I hope you are safe and warm and well fed. If you're looking for Christian worship and prayer, then I've included a few links below to some of the Lutheran churches that are doing some of the best liturgical stuff online and doing that kind of thing. But for us, I was more interested in this Easter season to delve into some different spiritual practices, specifically the practices of journaling, poetry, meditation, creating beauty, and delighting in nature. So today, we're looking at meditation. In preparing for today, I quickly looked up the definition for meditation and found that it is the action or practice of meditating. Well, that's wholly unhelpful. You can't just define a thing by saying the same word again. Meditating. Okay, start again. What is meditating? Cambridge Dictionary says it is to think calm thoughts or as a religious activity. Calmly, I wonder. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, wrote a poem about meditating called In Silence, which includes the lines, "The whole world is secretly on fire. The stones burn, even the stones, they burn me. How can a man be still or listen to all things burning? How can he dare to sit with them when all their silence is on fire?" Doesn't seem like a calming activity. At yogainternational.com, Swami Rama writes, meditation is a word that has come to be used loosely and inaccurately in the modern world. That is why there is so much confusion about how to practice it. Some people use the word meditate when they mean thinking or contemplating. Others use it to refer to daydreaming or fantasizing. However, meditation is not any of these. Meditation is a precise technique for resting the mind and attaining a state of consciousness that is totally different from the normal waking state. And so speaking broadly, meditation has something to do with awareness of yourself, but also with something more. And it's not really self-help, but growing somehow inside. I can't find the quote, but I think it was James Finley who wrote about going on retreat and entering into meditation, seeking silence but finding the noise in his head was too loud and only amplified when all around him was silent. There seems to be a disconnect. A Google image search for meditation yields images of peaceful people, lilies floating in water, grand and calm vistas. Yet some of the most popular voices in the field of meditation speak of chaos and noise inside. Maybe the Google images want to present the ideal, that moment where the mind is calm and communion with self and the world or God or peace or whatever is found. And perhaps this is why these COVID-19 times are hard. We've grown used to a certain volume and chaos in our lives. Assignments, deadlines, loud freeways, transit lines add a background of chaos, and our phones keep beeping and calling and distracting and making our attention go 10,000 different directions at the same time. If there is a tempest within, it is drowned out by the chaos outside. So what does this mean now for us? I called a friend of mine in Regina because I know that he meditates. And I thought that speaking to someone local would help because we can't fly around the world right now. Yet on the topic of meditation, we have some practitioners right here in Regina. Here's that interview. Well, good afternoon, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Steve Jeske, and I wanted to get to know Steve a little bit and to talk about one of the 5 things we're looking at through this Easter period, which was journaling, poetry, meditation, creating beauty, and delighting in nature. I've got my list on the whiteboard up beside me here. But just as a warm-up question for Steve, I wanted to ask a question that would help us to get to know you a little bit. And so the question to start is, what would 18-year-old you think about the you of today?
You'd probably think that I was pretty old. Probably think that maybe he lucked out in some ways. But I think that if my 18-year-old self had the level of self-awareness that I currently do now, he might have a little bit of pride as well. But I don't think that my 18-year-old self had that level of self-awareness. So who the hell really knows? Because I don't think that 18-year-olds think much about the future or themselves in the future at all. So
Right. Yeah. Well, this is my attempt to be all deep and find that good question to start, loosen things up a little bit here. And you of course are aware, we're in a group together. We're looking at a book called Navigating the Coming Chaos, a handbook for inner transition by Carolyn Baker. And I wanted to read a short excerpt, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of why I'm interviewing you today, which is about the topic of meditation and how that's kind of informed who you are and how you're doing. So the quote I'm reading from the book is, "Not surprisingly, most citizens of civilization are not only unfamiliar with the inner world, but profoundly uncomfortable in it, or perhaps even terrified of it. Ours is a world addicted to noise, meaningless activity, and superficial interactions with our fellow humans. Many humans cannot imagine sitting quietly alone with no distraction and only themselves. For some, this would be synonymous with being waterboarded or walking barefoot on broken glass." So I think when I think of the topics that she introduces and these ways of sort of fortifying ourselves, I think this is like the background of where the book came from and sort of a question of how we're doing this. And as I ask you to talk about meditation, I'm also aware that I live in this push and pull moment of life where there's this, you should do more and should, you know, all the shoulds of like, you would be happier if you just did this. And I don't want this to be more of that, but at the same time, we have to exist, right? So yeah, you agreed to come and talk to us a bit about meditation. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into that and how that works for you?
How I got into it, I think maybe I could have there would be three parts, and I'll make two of the parts really quick. One would be, I spent a couple years in Southeast Asia, one in South Korea and one in Thailand, a year each. And both of those countries have Buddhism as the main religion. And I wound up becoming pretty fascinated by that. And I did a lot of reading, did a lot of thinking about it, but I didn't really, I didn't wind up thinking that I wanted to pursue meditation at that point in time. Fast forward a few years, I used to live in Saskatoon. That was where I ping-ponged back and forth to Southeast Asia at that time, but then I moved to Regina for love, started having a family, and then I got interested in meditation at that time, started dabbling a little bit, but found that I just couldn't really balance it with a young child, couldn't find the time to just sit and be still, and that was okay. And then probably for the next 12 or 13 years, I went back and forth between being interested in it, taking some classes, practicing a bit, and then not doing anything. But then about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, some pretty significant life changes happened where I really needed to look internally at, can I swear on this at all? Or I won't swear, I'll say stuff.
I can make a bleep version and an unbleeped version too, so yeah.
I had to really take a look at all my beep, and the meditation is a really important way of doing that, because it turned out that I really had some things that I needed to look at that really needed attention, because if I didn't, well, I think it would be a bit of a stretch to say I wouldn't be sitting here today. I might be sitting somewhere else, but right. I wouldn't be sitting in very much of a happy place, that's for sure.
Right. So this is something that came along as part of I have some space in my life to make this work. And then now that we're all trapped in our homes and we're all doing this COVID thing and everything else, like, is it something you think that's making a difference currently? Because the idea of like these are practices, things that like all the things we talk about, things you do, and then the rest of life sort of follows. So there's no, is there a goal to meditation for you?
Not really. I think in that, with any teacher that I've had, they always stress the idea that if you do have a goal, that's ultimately just encouraging more striving, which is the equivalent of greed, at least in the practice that I do things. There are many different ways of meditating, but I will answer your question shortly, but the meditation that I do is called insight meditation, Vipassana meditation. Here's a book. here's a book you could look up. This is one of the main teachers. I can see the sunlight isn't really helping my cause.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. The Path of Insight Meditation. If you send me the link, I'll put it in the video description below.
Joseph Goldstien and Jack Cornfield were two of the three people that established meditation, this version of meditation, direct from the Buddha's lineage in North America like 3 or 4 decades ago. And long story short, you're just trying to operate with as much wisdom and compassion as you possibly can, and eliminate the greed and the hatred and the delusion as much as you can. And when you're sitting for the 30 minutes that I do every day, essentially you're just trying to get in touch with what's going on with you, just learning to be aware, being more conscious. And that isn't very pleasant lots of the time. And even if you wind up, for example, having a meditation where you feel like you were so unproductive, even though you're not supposed to be productive in meditation, that I find that the greatest gift that I've gotten in the last year and a half of being really serious is you just have a little bit of a space to deal with whatever might be really hard, whether it's your partner or your kid driving you crazy, especially in these times, or your own self. Like, as on a personal level, like I'm in the midst of applying for the benefit that the federal government is giving us, and I'm waiting on a record of employment. And I can just tell that when I buy into my impatience, I just kind of go a bit haywire, and then everybody just kind of has to watch their step around me, which isn't great. But the meditation can offer me the capacity to go, wow, I'm being pretty impatient about that. Can I actually deal with that in a better way? Yeah, I can deal with that in a better way. I can just let it go for now, and it's okay. And then you can kind of move on. So in terms of a goal, it is to be calmer, it is to be more peaceful, it is to bring that sort of thing into the world. But I still consider myself a bit of a neophyte, even though I've only been doing it really intensely for a year and a half. I can tell more that it's helpful in my day-to-day life than in the actual sittings that I do.
Right. Yeah. So maybe that parses out my first question of how is this not a self-help productivity thing? Because it's really more of a capacity building thing. You're building a capacity, noticing, and then if any benefits come, that's great because you've got capacity built. But it's not like do this and then you get I see a slight distinction there. Maybe that's that's a really good way of framing it, because prior to all the isolation that we're having to do, I took a number of classes with the Insight House here in Regina, and a couple of guys that I grew to really like in the classes, even though you don't really have a lot of time to chat, there is sharing and stuff. And he used that word. He was pretty new to the practice, and he was using that word a lot, like building capacity. And somebody else that I had known for a while but hadn't seen for a long time, and he was more of a dabbler a couple months ago. So what is it doing for you, Steve? Why are you still sticking with it? And I was hanging out with him and another guy who was a bit of a veteran, and I was just kind of saying, it just kind of allows you sometimes this little bit of space to make a little bit of a better call in terms of whatever it is. Instead of going into road rage, noticing the anger showing up and not honking your horn. Even that is better. It's because the lousy emotions and feelings are just going to come. I mean, you're human. It's just the way that it is. But whether you wind up acting on it and how you act on it that's kind of the fruit of it all. And so in this context, sometimes I'm having a really difficult time because I usually work at home and I'm always the only one at home, but now everybody's at home, and at my best, I can just notice, wow, I'm really anxious. Wow, I'm a little bit angry. Wow, I'm not going to take it out on my family. Yay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think that's some really good insights. I think just to what I learned, I think again, is the idea of the practice builds capacity. The practice is not to make you a better goal-oriented human, right? And so you've given us a couple names. I'll put them down in the links underneath the video there for the book. And is there anything else you'd want to the one piece? Is advice the right word? Maybe advice is not the right word. One tip, if say I was wow, I'm kind of inspired by what you said, I would like to get started. The best thing I could do is,
I think the best thing that you could do is to do a bit of research around what kind of meditation might suit you, because there are so many.
Okay.
And when I was first getting into it, a friend of both of ours he used to give me hassle about being a bit of a fascist about my way of doing things. Like,
Right.
if he's quote unquote meditating to music, and I would say, well, that's not really meditating, whatever, like that. It's like, I mean, from my point of view, it isn't, but maybe for him and his circumstances, that is beneficial. And I mean, there are many ways of doing it. You know, like, I typically don't listen to people guiding me, and that's helpful for me. But other people really appreciate that and value it, and that can be better for them. You know, and so just instead of just jumping into an app or just going, I'm going to do meditation and whatever I find first is the way to go. Find out like what the actual parameters are and what the actual, maybe goal isn't the right word, what the actual intention is, and then go from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll probably cut it off with some fancy fade or something, because I'm becoming a tech wizard of all these things. So, yes. Well, thank you so much for your time again, Steve. Yeah. And you have a good day.
Cheers.
My hope is that some version of meditation might help you out, and that the links below might help you find something that works for you. I put the picture of the panda here because that's what my brain does when I lie down to meditate. I get distracted by all sorts of things, and I've got a little more Kung Fu Panda in me and a little less Shifu. These are challenging times, so if you're feeling challenged and stressed out, then that's probably how you should feel right now. But don't do it alone. Reach out, find somebody, and check on the Luther College webpage, and you can reach out to me as the chaplain. I'm available for conversation, whether you're a student or anybody, really. We can try and find you the help you need. And maybe one of these chapel services, one of these practices will add a little bit of that inner capacity that you're looking for. Have a good day, and God's blessings to you.